Hi everyone, and welcome to Tony Tonkin Show on a Thursday afternoon. This is your opportunity to have a conversation with me and with others about the issues that matter to all of us. So please remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. It all helps, and particularly I need to say at the moment that I've done what I can to dismiss the automated advertising through YouTube. Now, I did that as a request by one of the comment sections last week, and I really do appreciate it. And I think can't see him here at the moment, but I think it was JG who did ask me to if I could reduce that. So the point I'm making is, please feel sorry for me, because at this particular point in time, I'm not monetizing this particular feed as it goes live. I will do after the event. And let me know whether you're getting advertisements where you really don't want them, because this is really about us having a clean feed so that we can have a discussion about the issues. It's also important to understand, I think, that it would be helpful if you could press the thank button and send me some money for a cup of coffee, maybe. Do what you need to do. And I've also got a poll up here. I've got 14 votes so far. Should the word intifada be banned is the question I'm asking today. And at the moment, 29% are saying yes, 71% are saying no. As I said before, this is an opportunity for you to have a discussion amongst yourselves about these issues, and certainly to have that conversation with me. So it's good to see so many people online at the moment to join in the conversation. And I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about the word intifada, and I think we need to understand the context of all of this, given that Grace Tame was particularly berated recently about her use of the word last Sunday or Monday, whenever it was, and how she was so enthusiastically describing the intifada from Gadigal land to Gaza. And I think it's important for all of us to understand exactly what does it mean and in what context it is used, and whether or not certain contexts may be or may not be inappropriate. But I guess that's for us as observers to work out for ourselves. So I did chat with my mate, Mr. Chat, George Peter Tolkien, who informed me the following, that intifada is an Arabic word that literally means uprising or shaking off. Now, at the moment, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's about being violent. It is an uprising or shaking off. In political use, it usually refers to Palestinian uprising against Israeli control, which we can understand given that Israel has been controlling most of its land over the Palestinians for decades now, and particularly the mess which we see on the West Bank, which many of us are not talking about these days because we're so focused on what's happening in Gaza. So the most commonly people mean, and I'll describe this to you. The first intifada was between 1987 and 1993, largely characterized by civil disobedience, protests, strikes, and clashes in the West Bank and Gaza. Now, the second intifada was between 2000 and 2005. Now, it needs to be acknowledged that that intifada was far more violent, involving armed attacks, suicide bombings, Israeli military operations, and heavy casualties on both sides. Remember that, it's just not one-sided. Outside that context, the word can simply mean a rebellion or mass resistance movement. But in modern conversation, especially in Western media, it's almost always tied to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So when someone uses the term, the key question isn't the dictionary definition, it's what kind of uprising they're invoking. Civil resistance, violent insurgency, or something symbolic. Words travel fast, and context matters even more. So that's the issue, I think, that actually when we're talking about intifada, what is the person saying? I don't think Grace was necessarily saying that this is about all of us uprising against Israel, and it certainly wasn't about uprising against the Jewish people. So we need to see this in context. And I've got a couple of clips I will be showing you in relation to all of this that I think is vitally important. And one of those is what Grace says herself. So now that we're talking about her, I'll bring up something on X, which where she explains to us what she means by this. And I think in this context particularly, remember that it is about context, that this particular explanation is quite important.
3,000 Palestinians have been evaporated by Israel using illegal US weapons. But instead of focusing on that, our political and media classes are trying to distract the masses by focusing on words that I said at a peaceful protest on Monday night in Sydney. Disingenuously distorting definitions has been a cornerstone of Israel's propaganda strategy for decades. Choosing to put a negative spin on the word intifada, which literally means shaking off, is just another example of that. But I am not the story. The story is that on Monday night, tens of thousands of peaceful protesters gathered to decry the arrival of Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, who himself stands credibly accused of war crimes, including inciting genocide and advocating collective punishment, a man who signed his name on bombs that were used to kill men, women, and children in Gaza. The non-violent attendees of these protests were met with unprovoked police brutality. Our leaders go on about social cohesion. What's a better example of social cohesion than tens of thousands of people from many and diverse backgrounds gathering, united in the pursuit of humanity? This has been a trend for years and years and years. The only thing that has changed, that is actively disrupting social cohesion, is the overreach of state powers, which we all saw footage of from Monday night. If the media had accurately reported on this context, we wouldn't be here. The big issue at hand is that the rogue apartheid state of Israel stands credibly accused of committing genocide in Gaza after over 2 years of the slaughter of innocent civilians. The only parties to have faced punishment are the victims themselves and critics of the state. This has to change. It is time for the political and media classes to prosecute the state of Israel and not focus on individual dissidents and people fighting for justice and humanity.
So there we have Grace's version of what, and I think it's worth noting that I don't think Grace fits into that category that we could argue is part of the Intifada, which is a more violent involved. She's not suggesting armed attacks. She's simply saying that really it's important for us to be able to focus on prosecuting Israel for what they're doing in Gaza. That is the better explanation, and that's my explanation of what Intifada is as well. I don't know what you think necessarily, but I'm sure you can add some comments to all of that as well. But we also have, to my delight, we have the attack from the right wing. So I'm gonna do something which I'm sure most of you will enjoy, and that's seeing Chris Kenny argue about this as well and what the Intifada means to him. And this is where we get the distortion around what we're suggesting actually should be an Intifada, which is an uprising or the shaking off of oppression by the Israeli government. And it's interesting how when one uses the word Intifada, automatically notions around anti-Semitism and a whole lot of other erroneous beliefs tend to rise to the surface, because this is the way they're interpreting the word intifada. And so we have a clip here from Chris Kenny, who's explaining how terrible Grace is, and that she should have her Order of Australia removed from her. And now that you've just heard her explanation, it's in stark contrast to what we hear from Kenny.
To Grace Tame, the one-time Australian of the Year, who disgraced herself with this remark at a rally in Sydney on Monday night. Here's a reminder.
From Gadigal to Gaza, globalise the intifada. One more time. From Gadigal to Gaza, globalise the intifada.
Yeah, Gadigal is the Aboriginal word for the Sydney area, so there can be no doubt about what this means. This is encouraging violence against Israel and Jews in Australia and right around the world. And all while Israel's president is a guest in our country. In fact, this is a call directly targeting his visit. The two intifadas against Israel in the 1990s and 2000s saw more than 1,000 innocent people killed in Israel by suicide bombers and other attacks. Young kids, women and children, even Australians were killed by terrorists. And the Bondi massacre is another example.
So this is where the distortion comes in. So this is Kenny telling us that the type of intifada being referred to by Grace is this violent, armed attack, suicide bombers and so forth. And it's also, about the Israeli involvement in military operations as well. And how, as a result of that version of intifada, the heavy casualties were committed on both sides, as it turned out. Well, this isn't what she is talking about. And I think this is where we need to be clear. The distortion that we get from people like Kenny and others needs to be called out for what it is, because it is untrue. I could refer to intifada, you could refer to intifada, but we're not referring to armed attacks or insisting that there be further violence. That isn't it. It is about pushing back against what Israel is doing in Gaza. And I think this is really important that we must note that. Someone says, well, she can go to Gaza and fight the intifada. Sorry, buddy, whoever this is, you're missing the whole point here. And I'll bring this up. She can go to Gaza. I find that sort of argument pathetic, to say the least, because we're not going to suggest that she goes to Gaza and fight the intifada, because clearly, whoever you are, you have not understood what I've just been saying and the description I've been given of an intifada. We can fight, and I'll change the word from intifada now to something that perhaps that people can understand. We can push back against the violence perpetrated against the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. End of story. We can call it intifada, we can call it resistance, we can call it whatever we like. But remembering that the first intifada was characterized by civil disobedience, protest strikes, and clashes in the West Bank and Gaza. And this is what we're saying, is that here in Australia, we need to stand up for human rights. We need to stand up for the rights of those people that are being bombed and killed in Gaza, and those people that are oppressed and having their land and homes taken from them in the West Bank. These are issues that should concern all of us and that we should feel passionate about, and that it is about the resistance to what the Israeli government is doing. This is not a clash with the Jewish people. I'll play a little bit more of what this character, Chris Kenny, has to say as well, just to put things, I guess, to give him a fair go and put things in context. I need to clear that. Here we go.
Example of what it might mean to globalise the intifada. Here's Liberal frontbencher and Australian Jew Julian Leeser.
I don't care whether you're a high-profile Australian or you're just an ordinary Australian. No one should be calling for the violent murder of Jews on our streets. I'm sick and tired of this, and I think she and others should face the full force of the law.
He's not wrong, but...
And I think that's a distortion. Now, I'm particularly disappointed, Lisa. I mean, he to me has had a sense of integrity, particularly around Indigenous issues, I think. And but in this particular instance, this is not what she's got. But we are not people who like Grace Tane, as was expressed in her TikTok video. She's not about creating violence in our streets. Now, the problem that we have here is that sort of conversation is in itself divisive because it is untrue. It's true of her intent. It's untrue of her intent, and it's untrue in so many other aspects as well. And Danielle Cooper has asked this comment, and I'll put it up if I can. What about Australian rights? I have no idea, Danielle, what in friggin' hell you're talking about. What's this got to do with it? What has this got to do with Australian rights? Please explain, as Pauline Hansel would say, who you're probably a fan of, incidentally. Let's hear more about my friend, my buddy, my mate, Chris.
What are the chances of that law being enforced or enacted? They've got to be pretty slim, I think. Let's get a view from Israel. And I'm pleased to be joined again by Sharon Haskell, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel. Thanks for joining us again, Sharon. I'm sorry that you are hearing these calls from Australian streets, even from prominent Australians. How are they being received in Israel?
Wow, it's actually heartbreaking to see that while our president is coming, and the purpose of the visit is to come and comfort, to come and stand in solidarity with the Jewish community in Australia after a terrible massacre and anti-Semitic terror.
Okay, dispense with that woman. But I do need to say that there is no, they never ever, and this is from the right of politics in particular, and this is extremely frustrating, but they never ever talk about the devastation that they're causing. So this woman here, Sharon Haskell, is not going to necessarily concede that what Israel is doing in Gaza is a kind of intifada as well, the extreme kind. That she's never going to admit to the murder of tens of thousands, up to about 70,000 people. She's never, ever going to admit to that. And it is absolutely disgraceful. I want to bring us to another particular point, which I need to make. And I made this point actually at in a post I did yesterday, which was trying to understand the difference in the Jewish community between the right wing, the AGA, the Australian Jewish Association, and other elements, more moderate and progressive versions of the movement. And so I've got a clip here also of my friend Anthony Lowenstein, who is talking at a rally. It's only about 50 seconds or so, but I'll play this to you. And actually what it says here is that he says, the Jewish Council, this is from the Jewish Council of Australia, and we must note this. The simple fact is that Israeli actions endanger all of us, including Jews, because what Israel is doing claims to in our name, in my name. And believe me when I say it is not in my name. Thank you to Advisory Committee member Anthony Lowenstein for speaking out last night. So here's what Anthony said.
The idea somehow that the president of Israel, who's deeply complicit in genocide, is somehow a friendly visit to Australia for more than 2 years. I mean, frankly, nearly 80 years. But certainly since October 7, we had seen mass starvation, death, killing, rape by Israeli soldiers and Palestinians. And somehow we're being told, as the president of Israel said in the media on the weekend, that you all are brainwashed for supporting Palestinian rights. The simple fact is that Israeli actions endanger all of us, including Jews, all of us, because what Israel is doing what Israel is doing claims to be in our name, in my name. And believe me when I say it is not in my name at all.
So we need to be mindful, very much aware, in fact, that there are many in the Jewish community, such as Anthony, who are fighting against what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank. It is important for all of us to understand that there is this other version. So if I'm not Jewish, obviously, but if I was and I was having people in Israel expressing views which I disagree with entirely, you know, it'd be no different from me objecting to many of much of what the Labor Party does, because I disagree ethically with some of the things that they're doing, particularly their alliance with the United States. So it is about recognizing that there are other people who are Jewish, who recognize that what is being done is harmful to them. And so I'm going to take us to another clip. So I'm going to bore you with, I've only got 2 clips to do, but I'm going to bore you with one from Tony Abbott, and then I'll take us to the Muslim leaders and how the other side may be viewing all of this as well, and particularly, I guess, the Muslim community. So in this particular clip, turn out of his voice for police powers on Monday's protest is the heading, and this is my friend, Credlin.
Back to some Liberal issues and a bit more with former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, who joins me now. Tony, thank you for your time. You love having a whack where you think the police need support, and you certainly did the other day, coming in.
Now, in this address, or in this conversation with the person, these 2 people just love each other. I'm not suggesting they're lovers or anything, but they just do. They fawn over each other. It's freaking sickening to watch. But I want you to listen to the language used by Tony Abbott, because Tony Abbott is influential within the Liberal Party. And if the Liberal Party are going to move further and further to the right, it is Tony Abbott who's going to influence their thinking around all of these issues that we're just discussing. So listen carefully to what Tony has to say.
In support of the New South Wales Police Force and the Commissioner after those protests turned violent on Monday, what motivated you to speak so forcefully as you did?
Well, Peter, for the best part of 2 years, anarchist Islamist protesters...
Right. So let's take apart a little bit of what Tony's... anarchists and terrorists is what he says, ripping us apart. Well, I would like Tony Abbott to tell us who are the anarchists, particularly. So does that mean that you're an anarchist if you disagree with their version of politics, or if you have a different argument, or if you just see things differently to them? This makes you an anarchist, apparently, according to this clown.
...have been in charge of our streets. It's about time the elected and accountable government regained control. So I say good on New South Wales Police, good on the Commissioner, good on the Premier, good on the opposition leader for standing united in support of our police and against the violence of these protesters who are no longer exercising...
Now, there's so much to say about this moron. And I guess the most important thing is to identify the fact that there was not, from what I have seen, I'm not suggesting for a moment that there may have been some people that acted badly, probably were. But from what I've seen and all the clips that I've seen, I'm horrified at what the police did. That their actions were violent. There's no disputing that. But people like Tony Abbott only want to focus on this anarchist version, this intifada, someone give me the word, these anarchists, that they want to make sure that the other side is completely void of any responsibility around what happened at these protests, that the protests were peaceful. That is the story. They were disrupted by the Min's government and the police by choosing to have a restricted space in which people were not allowed to move out from, even after the rally had concluded. It is horrible. It is lousy policing. You know, we've had rallies around Australia for years now, since October the 7th. And all of those rallies have been peaceful. So what is it about the police in New South Wales which has brought about the violence? The violence from them, not from the protesters. So on one hand, we have criticism of Grace Tame for what she says about intifada. And now we have Tony Abbott expressing his dismay, his disappointment, his blaming of the violence from those people that he hates the most, which are those people that stand up against Israel. It is pathetic, it is woeful, but unfortunately, it is who Tony Abbott is.
A right to free speech, but which are basically trying to intimidate the Australian community. And I thought it was very telling, Peter, that the phrase that was echoing around Town Hall Square on Monday night was this: from Gadigal to Gaza, globalise the intifada.
And we're about to experience a man who cannot differentiate between the terminology intifada and what Grace was necessarily referring to. So this is where you have your own specific filter, which you tend to channel into your own hate and despicableness, if there is such a word, of anybody who thinks differently to you. And the problem that I have with that is it cuts off the conversation. So, you know, my question to Tony would be, why do you believe that what Grace was saying was necessarily about a violent response in Australia to what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank? Where does that information come from for you? What informs you about that? Because it is your version of your sense of prejudiceness that brings about that sort of interpretation, if you like.
Basically, what's being called for by these people is not some kind of resistance to Israel. It's actually resistance to Australia. They want...
Where in the fuck does that come from? It's resistance, not resistance to Israel, it's resistance to Australia. You know, that sort of inane, sort of crappy, shitty stuff that he's talking about makes you wonder, actually, whether he's got all his faculties together, is a very confused individual.
A campaign of suicide bombings and shootings and knifings.
A campaign of suicide bombings, shootings and knifings. Where in the hell does he get that from? This is the extreme version of the right wing, which is influenced by this human excrement, is the man that influences, you know, well, firstly, let's acknowledge he's on the One Nation network at the moment, which is Sky, and he's also, I think, attempting to set a position which he would like the right wing and the Liberal Party in Australia to adopt. And we need to be really mindful of this stuff, because it is these people that are listening to this shit that are going to wind up voting for One Nation. Not for him and his party, but voting for One Nation. I'll just have a little bit more of him and then we'll finish with him, thank God.
And car rammings into crowds, because that's what the intifada was. They want to bring that to Australia. So this is not just anti-Australian behaviour by these people, it's militant hostility and aggression towards our country. It's got to...
See, I would define that as hate speech, actually, and that he should be charged for inciting hatred in our community. And He is a absolute disgrace. So let me know what you think about all of that, and I'm going to take us now to the Muslim side of things. So how do the Muslims see this? Because the Muslim people who are the ones being impacted by the behaviour of Israel in Gaza and the West Bank. So it is the Muslim people that are being impacted by this greatly. So we need to acknowledge their thoughts, their responses to what's happening, and particularly what their responses to the protest and how they're being treated in Gaza. Sorry, in Sydney. So which is kind of a bit like maybe Gaza, who knows? But so we need to be able to define some of that and to talk about it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take us to this particular article, which is Muslim leaders urge public apology over police handling at the Sydney protest. So we've got some videos here. So I'll just play this video if I can. So this is Muslim people praying. Now, I'll ask you this. If it was a priest standing in front of a group of people who were just standing there with their arms crossed or were crossing themselves or whatever Roman Catholics do, if they were doing that and a priest was talking to them about peace and love and all that sort of stuff, would the police, would the police have raided them? Would the police have made an effort to disrupt something if it was Christian-based? Now, my guess is no, they wouldn't have. And it's important for us to understand that this is about sectarianism. This is about dividing between one religion and another, giving one religion probably more leeway than another religion. And because they were Muslims and it was at an anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian rally, clearly they got singled out. So it goes on to say, a Muslim leader is warning a damaging rift between the community and New South Wales Police could emerge if no public apology is given for the actions of officers at a protest in Sydney. Footage shows a group of Muslim men being forcibly pushed out by police officers during prayer at Monday night's rally against Israel President Isaac Herzog's visit. The protest, organised by a Palestinian Action Group, started peacefully but became violent when some wanted to march to New South Wales Parliament, despite not being allowed to under a public assembly restriction declaration. New South Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon on Wednesday said he had made contact with senior members of the Muslim community to apologise for any offence that may have been taken. And I put up on my post, I think I had this segment from the Lebanese community talking about actually what all of this meant to them. And it is important to note that it isn't only the progressive and the moderate Jewish community that are offended by this, people like Anthony Lowenstein. It's also many others in the community. And let's not forget the Muslim community and how all of this stuff, this notion around anti-Semitism, also impacts them. Because there's a lot of Islamophobia that goes with all of this as well. But for some reason, I think this tends to get missed in the discourse. So Lebanese Muslim Association Secretary Gamal Kia said the Commission's private apology to a few Muslim leaders did not go far enough. The worshippers were doing absolutely nothing wrong and everything as requested by the police. He was among several Muslim organisations that have condemned police actions and called for an apology. He said allegations from Commissioner Lanyon and Premier Chris Minns that police did not want their lines breached did not stack up. How were people praying on all fours with their heads to the ground bowing? How are they possibly going to break any police line? And anybody that's seen this video will understand exactly what he's saying. In the Islamic religion, a prayer cannot be stopped. If they're police not educated in the sensitivities of other religions and communities, then that's a blame on the police force, not on the people praying. And I think we need to be clear that the reality is that much of what we see is Islamophobic. Some of what we see is about breeding further anti-Semitism, and as we saw from Tony Abbott, is actually also about breeding further hate, which is totally wrong. Someone has said apparently these people were professional provocateurs. Okay, I will accept that notion. I don't know exactly who you're referring to. I don't know if you were there. And then there's this stupid concept, I guess, that you hear from the right wing, and it's a kind of trope in a way, that there are professional people who are paid. Now, I don't know who's paying them. Is it Antifa, that mysterious organisation on the left of politics? Is it George Soros in the United States? Who is it in Australia that pays, who is it who pays for them to be professional provocateurs? It's a crazy, stupid, ignorant notion. So having busy having a conversation. I'll try and get to your conversations in a moment. It's really hard sometimes to have that conversation with you when I'm basically ranting and raving here, trying to discuss some of this stuff as well. I also I want to kind of finish a little bit by saying that it is important for us to do what Anthony Albanese is suggesting that we've done. And we could have a conversation about Anthony Albanese, how he fits amongst all of this anyway. He should never have invited Herzog to Australia, end of story. He could have invited a rabbi who didn't have any history about signing bombs and dropping them on Gazans. We could have had somebody else that was more acceptable to the Australian community than Herzog, even though I'm quite sure there still would have been some rallies and some disruption as a result, no matter who it is we had from Israel. But the point is that all of this is divisive. We're not finding ways to get together to have conversations about how this should look. I would love to see someone like Anthony Lowenstein speak to someone who's on the right of us, such as David Adler, and talk to them about their version of Jewishness so that we could have a reasonable dialogue about how this impacts both sides. It is evident, as I posted yesterday, that the Australian Jewish Association is endeavouring to embed itself in the right of politics. It is not the majority. My guess is, to a large extent, haven't got any facts or figures on all this, so I might stand corrected, that the AGA represents a minority of Jewish people who actually see what's happening, that Israel, the country, is doing in Gaza is wrong. There are many people who would see that, and I would certainly support them in terms of them pushing back against someone like David Adler and the Australian Jewish Association, because the Australian Council of Jewism is a different organisation altogether, and certainly has a completely different view around all of these issues as well. So I'll just go through some of Tony, you have a very informative show. I'll continue to watch. You're more centrist in my views. Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks, WRX. And I also want to just remind people to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for the notifications, And if you could just punch the thank button below and send me a contribution, that would be that would benefit me, because I don't get paid for this, because I'm not monetizing it, as I said at the outset. I want to just change. I just want to know how. I'll just have a look at some of the comments. Someone said, like we could talk about the contradictions that sit in the Bible until I'm blue in the face. Moses also said something about love thy neighbor. So true. I will have this conversation with you though. And it's this. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and this is a bit sidestepping. I'm going to talk in a moment about a landmark court decision in the Catholic Church in relation to pedophilia priests. But before I go there, I raised this issue the other day, and my son stood back and thought, "Whoa, dear Christ, where are you coming from, Dad?" And that is, as a species, the human species, we are horrible. Absolutely horrible. Because, there are wars around the world. There's not only Gaza, there's Ukraine, there is there's Africa, there's lots of countries, Somalia, Nigeria. There is a whole lot of hotspots right around the world. There always have been. The human nature seems to be, let's fight back, let's destroy this. This stuff that Tony Abbott talked about is kind of emanates from this horrible nature that human nature has, whereby we must hate people. We have, and we must sectionalize ourselves into tribes. And some of those really powerful, important tribes are oligarchs. For 10% of the wealth in the world is owned by the majority of those people that are wealthy, by oligarchs. And that 60-70% of the world are poor. Most of the world is in poverty. Most of the world struggles to survive, to have food from one day to the next. Yet there's enough food in the world to be able to supply everybody with enough food. There's enough income in the world to get rid of all diseases worldwide, to invest in aid so we can help countries in Africa and in India and Afghanistan and Asia and other countries. There's enough resources. We kill each other at an alarming rate, right? And it's not just through war. It's just about sometimes this sense of inhumanity that we have, that we kill each other at an alarming rate, and it distresses me greatly. It's like the Americans taking away USA ID so that they didn't have to pay money, soft power, in fact, to other countries, where in fact that helped, that assisted greatly in dealing with and abolishing measles and a whole host of diseases around the world, and helped to keep under control Ebola so that it didn't start to infect the rest of the world. These are things. So on one hand, we're stupid, we're violent, we're aggressive. We don't care about other people. We care about accumulating wealth. This is what we tend to do. This is what we want to do. It is wrong. On the other hand, our species is extremely creative. When we're confronted with a dilemma that's going to determine our existence or not, we find ways to overcome it. We find ways to meet the moment. Yet, that is never a priority. That is never a priority. Like in Australia, we've got an issue around, there's a whole host of issues. I've got so many examples of all of this. I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I do need to say that, you know, we've got powerful men in the United States and around the world who are trafficking in women and children. And yet we allow it to happen. We've got a case in the United States now, so you might have heard of it, called the Epstein case, where it is evident that powerful and rich men are abusing and sexually assaulting girls. And that Donald Trump is a part of all of that. And yet we have the gall to ignore it, to, you know, the powers that be have the power to dismiss it, to make out it's not happening, to cover it up. So that's the other thing about humanity. When the rich, the famous, and the influential are confronted by the things that they need to be confronted by, they have the power to bury it. So that people like you and I don't get to see it. People that are victimized by their abuse don't get the ability to be able to confront their abusers. It is shameful, but it is who we are. And it's channels like mine, and the reason why I exist as a social worker is to fight back against that terrible, disgusting degree of humanity that appalls me. Tony Abbotts of this world, the Gina Rineharts of this world, the Pauline Hansons of this world, I find repulsive human beings because they express the worst of humanity. You know, someone said, you know, just a minute ago that I quoted, that, what was it? I've still got it there. Moses also said something about love thy neighbour. Well, you've got to wonder, don't you, about how much we love our neighbour when we treat them, our neighbour, so badly. And it doesn't matter whether it be Australia, Nigeria, Afghanistan. As a world, we're thinking more, we're connecting more. We understand and know each other's problems. But we ignore them. Those people that have got power, like the United States, even Australia, middle powers have got the power to deal with it. But we don't, and we don't call it out. We allow people like Donald Trump, the fuckwick of the world, to determine how it is that we should deal with our financial institutions, how we should deal with trade. We don't all gather together and build an alliance against those worst people. We allow those worst people to have the power and authority that they have that will control and govern us. And it is wrong. Absolutely wrong. It's a disdain on humanity. But we allow it to happen because many of us don't believe we could fight back. Many of us sit back in our armchairs and think, oh shit, there's nothing I can do about all of this. I'm powerless. The best we can do is to find a way to fight back against them. And that's what I try to do with my channel. I may or may not be successful. I ask people to subscribe so that the word can get out wider than it is. And fortunately, that's taken off in the last 12 months. Help me get to 10,000 subscribers. That's all I ask. Just help me to get to 10,000 subscribers and then 20,000. And then, you know, I invite you to come along to my channel, to talk to me about some of these issues, to empower you to have the conversations with me. You don't have to agree with me. You know, I've encouraged people that come on this chat to contact me and have a conversation with me about the things that matter to you. I'm interested in hearing what they are. I don't want to necessarily challenge you. I certainly don't want to rip you down. You know, I will have a shot at people who have power and authority. I will have a shot at Sky News, Tony Abbott, Credland, Paul Murray, all those characters. I will have a shot because they hold power. They have influence. All I have is just a minor little YouTube channel with nearly 10,000 subscribers. That's all I've got. I just need to say thanks, Cosman, for your $10. It's greatly appreciated. Also, Mr. Beach and GJ again. Thank you. Oh, making me feel emotional now. Not making me. I just feel emotional. So thanks. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, given I've turned off monetization for this channel, for this live feed. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I can say. I wanted to, now that I've had that rant, I just want to, I don't want to labour it too much, but I guess this is personal, but I live in a world whereby for over 35 years, I've worked with the worst possible circumstances you could imagine, from extreme child abuse to women being battered and bruised by men, and worked with men who are violent. I've done all of that stuff, and I've talked about it before. And you can walk away, and maybe I'm a bit tainted by that, because you can walk away from all of that thinking the world is fucked. You know, there's so much shit happening out there that the world is not a good place. But then I know that there are other people out there who are doing good work. And the problem is we do not hear enough of them. And one of the issues is there's a story where, I wish I could remember the organisation now. Anyway, this organisation set up this radio station. This is some 40, 50 years ago now. And all they wanted to do was to focus on good news, the things that people are doing that are benefiting their community. This is all they wanted to do. And so they set up this radio station thinking that people wanted to hear good news. Now, this is a side of humanity which is really disappointing, because they failed. They failed. People were not interested. You know, it's like, you know, the internet. You know, I don't have 20, 50,000 subscribers because I don't rage enough. I don't, you know, apart from what I've just done, okay? But I don't. I try to present information based on a progressive perspective. That's what I do. But there are people who are just like Megan Kelly and others who just want to rage against the left wing. That's all they want to do. And as a result of that, well, firstly, they're popular. They had a reputation, that sort of shit. I haven't had any of that. But nevertheless, and it's not about raging against them. It's about speaking about, in my view, the inhumanity that is perpetrated against the most vulnerable people in our community. That is what the fight's about. That is what I'm about. And I do want to thank you. And thank you, Farry, also for your $10. I'm going to get emotional again. Stop it. No, stop. Keep putting money. But thank you. So I want to go into this conversation, which, bear with me, I'll do in just a second. Right, so someone said me, yep, thanks, D, I appreciate that. So I just want to go into this because this is another side of the coin which has concerned me and particularly my wife over many years. And that is about talking about power and control, and how the Catholic Church has got away with, how can I put it? They have permitted sexual assault within the priesthood for decades, centuries, for as long as they've been around. And that we've been waiting to see whether or not there has been any shift in relation to all of that. And so I was delighted when I saw this particular headline the other day. Landmark High Court ruling finds Catholic Church had duty to protect New South Wales child from pedophile priests. Finding over abuse in Newcastle Maitland Diocese signals major shift in church's liability to victim survivors. The High Court has delivered a landmark win for survivors of clergy abuse, finding the Catholic Church had a duty of care to protect a child from one of its pedophile priests. Hello! Where in the hell have you been for all these years? You know, we've had the inquiry into child abuse in institutions. It came up with some good outcomes. It provided some funding for people for retribution, and that was a great thing. but we have never seen the High Court. So this is my issue. My issue is that the Roman Catholic Church had so much power and influence that they have prevented their taking responsibility for what their priests, their employers did. And their argument has been that these people were not their employees. But they are. And they have now been forced to take responsibility for this. A man known only as AA sued the Catholic Church's Newcastle and Maitland Diocese over abuse he suffered at the hands of Father Ron Peckin in 1969 when he was aged just 13. The abuse took place in a presbytery after Peckin had offered AA and another boy alcohol and cigarettes. AA argued the diocese was liable for his abuse because it owed him a non-delegable duty of care, and they talk about that. In other words, a duty of care which could not be shifted to another entity or person, and had breached that duty by allowing his abuse. The church said it owed no such duty of care because there was no evidence it knew of the risks posed by priests at the time. And we must also remember that as far as the Roman Catholic Church was concerned, the conversations were had between priests and bishops in relation to the abuse, and the bishops always chose to move that person on, hoping that it would be dispensed with and be put under the carpet. So that has now been diminished. The church is successfully, in New South Wales anyway, in their highest court, it's the Court of Appeal, that they delivered this judgment to overturn the original decision. So there is some. So when I look at humanity and this discussion I was just having with you, it is important to understand that sometimes there is an equilibrium. Somehow there is some sort of melding of all of this. Somehow there is a correction. You know, it's like when I look at the Epstein files, I see a government trying to protect the wealthy and influential people. And I see them trying to protect themselves because many of those people are the ones that are influencing what happens in those decisions, particularly Donald Trump. But what I do recognise also is that even though it's not immediate, over time, the realisation will come. The realisation will be there that information, that all the stuff that's redacted around those sexual assaulters will come to fore. And those people will eventually be prosecuted for their crimes, regardless of who they are. Because at some level, there is a levelling of the playing field. It may never level in terms of the financial benefits people make, the oligarchs that live in this world, and how they can influence the system. How Murdochs and others can influence what we're reading and what we're thinking, and people like Tony Abbott can do the same. All of that stuff at some point will level itself out. You know, because there are papers such as The Guardian, and I must say the ABC, some people would disagree with that, who do see things a wee bit differently than do the mainstream media. And so I want to come now to, if I can friggin' find it. All right, so it was mentioned that Tony Abbott was a mate with George Pell. He was, and that he attended George Pell's funeral. Pell, that is, a pedophile, as we all know, and as a result of all of that, Pell was found guilty, later exonerated, and then died. What does it say about Tony Abbott? That he was actually part of that group, that accolade that supported. And he's trying to thank you, $20. Wow, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. We've had a lot of views, a lot of people have stayed with me, more than what we've had before. And I just try and feather my way through. So I really appreciate some of those contributions, a bit overwhelmed. So I'll try and find some. Does anyone to the Low Group gifted it to the New South Wales government? Sorry, S. Smith, I don't quite know what you mean there. Of the message on that. So if you could explain that, sorry, I can't. I'll put that up, but I can't understand it. All right, I just want to I'll put that up. So because I agree with this. We are watching in real time a fall of the American empire. I don't think any statement is more truer than that. That right at this particular point in time, the American empire is crumbling. That we refer back, I wasn't around at the time, but I believe the Roman Empire took a bit of a tumbling some 1,000-odd years ago. American empire is the same. And so, and I guess so I thank you for that, because that bears out my point. But the point being that there is a leveller, as much as appalling as it might be for to see some of the things that are happening in the United States, to see things that are happening in Australia that appall me, to see the attack on Grace Tame, to see the way the right-wing media responds to this, to even see, okay, how's this? Even see the mess that is the Liberal Party, and how to me, you know, I haven't voted Liberal for a long time. I've explained to you at one point that I was a member of the Liberal Party, actually stood for the Liberal Party many years ago. In another lifetime, realised the errors of my ways and have moved on. But I don't want to see them dismantled. I don't want to see them eradicated. I don't want to see them lose some degree of influence in terms of holding government to what's the word? I don't want to see them so dismantled that they are not an opposition and they don't hold the government to account. That is important that they do. I don't want One Nation to take on that mantle because they don't demonstrate any real expertise and they are too far right to be of benefit to any of us. At least the Liberal Party have had the opportunity to have power. At least they have some people within the organisation, not very many these days, I hasten to add, who understands how government works, and they will not bastardise the governmental system and governance in general. So I'm disappointed to see what's happening for them as well. And so that takes me to this dude. So we're about, this is a dramatic change of tact, I think, but nevertheless, let's go there. Angus Taylor is a gross disappointment, always has been, always will be, but he is the one discussing him taking over the role from Susan Lee. Not a fan of Susan Lee, but is she better than Angus Taylor? In my opinion, she is. So I just wanted to give you this little bit of this overview of Angus so that we could get a sense as to who this man is. So who is Angus Taylor? So by tomorrow we'll probably be a member of, so I just got to straight to the end. So he'll probably be someone who will be the Liberal Party leader. Boom, boom. So Longtown's the Liberal leader. Some colleagues see only style and no substance, and that's how I would see him too. The problem with Angus is that he doesn't actually do anything. One colleague says as a former minister with a glossy CV. And that's so true, actually. Even before he entered federal parliament in 2013, Angus Taylor was touted as a future leader of the Liberal Party and a future Prime Minister, heaven forbid. Smart, rich and handsome, one headline dubbed the incoming member of Hume. A Rhodes Scholar, well done. Management consultant and CEO of one of the New South Wales Monaro region's founding families, Taylor was described as having a CV almost too good to be true. One enthusiastic journalist even suggested he had the looks and the charm of a young Kennedy. Announcing he ran to replace Susan Lee's opposition leader on Thursday, it could fall to Taylor to restore the down-and-out Liberal Party. It won't happen, but nevertheless, they're going to try. Having quit the front bench to bring on the spill and end Lee's nine-month tenure as opposition leader, Taylor promised strong and decisive leadership that gives Australian clarity and courage and confidence. It took Taylor weeks to cobble together the numbers to topple Lee, who had beaten him for the leadership by a handful of votes after last year's federal election. At the end of January, Taylor was photographed attending talks in Melbourne with his potential rival and fellow Conservative Liberal Andrew Hastie, who would have been a better choice, I hasten to add, who subsequently conceded he did not have enough support to take on Lee. So, we're ready for a bun fight. And how will it turn out? I reckon it will be a mess. He is a terrible performer in Parliament. He has not had any real position of power or authority that has shone him in any great light. As the opposition spokesman for Treasury, he was disgusting, and Chalmers was all over him. So perhaps that also will be the case. Who knows? I just want to thank you all for being here. I didn't have enough chance to go through. There's so many issues and so many conversations you're having amongst yourselves, and that is part of what we do. It is about providing the opportunity for all of you to be able to have those conversations. I just want to say, remember, if you haven't already, you might have thought you had. If you haven't, please subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. Let me know what you think. And if you're watching this later, also remember to hit the thank button, contribute as well. I really do appreciate it. So I just want to say thanks, everybody. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Just take care.